Hey there, and welcome. So, have you ever had that heart-stopping moment where your computer just ties on you? It feels like a modern-day mystery, right? Well, don't worry, because today we're making you the detective. So let's grab our magnifying glass and get ready to crack this case. You know that feeling, that awful silence when your PC should be humming along. You hit the power button and absolutely nothing. It is so frustrating. But listen, panic is the enemy of a good investigation. Every problem has a solution and we're going to find it just by looking for the clues. So what is it that we're actually doing here? This whole thing is called hardware troubleshooting. And look, this isn't about random guessing or just hoping for the best. It's a real systematic process, gathering evidence, identifying suspects, and solving the problem to get your system back up and running smoothly. All right, every good detective needs a plan, and here's ours. First, we'll dive right into the heart of the machine, the core components like the power supply, the motherboard, and the CPU. Then we'll investigate some of the most common culprits, like your RAM and storage. After that, we'll see why keeping things cool and connected is so important. And finally, we'll wrap up with the final troubleshooting steps that will help you crack pretty much any case. Okay, first things first, we are going straight to the heart of your PC. These are the big three, the components that absolutely everything else relies on. If one of these fails, well, the whole operation can grind to a complete halt. Our number one suspect, especially when you're in a no-power situation, is the power supply unit, or PSU for short. Think of it like the power plant for your entire system. If that plant starts to fail, the symptoms can be really dramatic, like total silence, or they can be frustratingly subtle. So, a failing PSU leaves behind a trail of clues. No power is, of course, the most obvious one, but you gotta use your other senses too. Can you hear the fan spinning? Or is there maybe a faint burning smell? Is your computer just restarting for no reason? These are all classic telltale signs that point directly at your power supply. Let's move on to our next suspect, the motherboard. This thing is basically the central nervous system connecting every single part of your PC. Now, before your screen even turns on, the motherboard does this really quick self-check. And if it finds a problem, it might actually talk to you through a series of beeps. These are called beep codes, and you can think of it like Morse code for computer trouble. So how do we actually investigate the motherboard? Well, first up is a visual inspection. You're looking for any physical damage, like these capacitors with bulging tops. That's a super clear sign that the components inside have failed. Next, you can try resetting it. But the most important step is what we call a minimal boot test. That's where you remove everything except the bare essentials, CPU, one stick of RAM, to try and isolate the problem. It's all about that process of elimination. And that brings us to the brain of the entire operation, the CPU. A failing CPU can cause all sorts of chaos, from frequent crashes to that dreaded blue screen of death. The tricky part is, these symptoms can be confusing because other components can cause them too, which is exactly why our investigation has to be so thorough. All right, let's move on to our next group of suspects. Now, these components might not stop your PC from starting up at all, but boy, can they make it unstable, unreliable, and just a total pain to use. Does this look a little too familiar? That infamous blue screen, it can pop up for so many reasons, and it often feels like a complete dead end. But for a detective, this isn't an ending, it's a clue. And it's a clue that points us toward a few key suspects. And this slide right here perfectly illustrates why troubleshooting is detective work. You see, a faulty CPU and bad RAM can both trigger that exact same blue screen. The symptoms overlap, and that means we have to dig a little deeper and test each component one by one to find the real culprit. Let's focus on RAM for a second, or your system memory. This is basically your computer's short-term workspace. When it starts to go bad, you'll see things like applications crashing for no reason, your whole system will randomly freeze up, or it might just decide to restart right in the middle of your work. It's a classic cause of instability. And what about your storage drive? The place where all your precious data lives. Well, a failing hard drive often gives you a very unique clue you can actually hear, that dreaded click of death. You might also notice your files are suddenly corrupted, or your computer is really struggling to even boot up in the first place. Now, let's take a step back and examine the environment. See, sometimes the problem isn't a core component at all, but the system that's supposed to be supporting it. Heat and connectivity. These are two absolutely critical factors that can cause a perfectly good PC to act up. A computer that runs too hot is a computer that's in trouble. Overheating is a huge cause of sudden shutdowns.
That's actually your PC trying to protect itself from damage. You might also notice your performance suddenly taking a nosedive. This is called thermal throttling, and it's where the system literally slows itself down just to cool off.
So what are the clues here? Well, your fans might start to sound like a jet engine taking off. You can use software to confirm really high temperature readings, and those two key symptoms we just talked about, that performance throttling and those sudden shutdowns, are crystal clear signs you need to investigate your PC's cooling situation. But what if a very specific function just stops working? Maybe your monitor suddenly goes blank, or you completely lose your internet connection. In cases like these, the evidence usually points to an expansion card, like your graphics card or your network card, as the prime suspect. Now, investigating these is usually pretty straightforward. First things first, just make sure the card is physically seated correctly in its slot. Then you're going to want to check your software and drivers, and if all else fails, testing with a replacement card is really the final step to confirm your diagnosis for good. So, we've looked at all the suspects, and we've examined all the clues. Now it's time to put it all together. Because cracking any case really just comes down to having a clear, repeatable method that you can follow every time. And it all comes down to this single, powerful 4-step method. Number 1, observe the symptoms. What is the computer actually doing wrong? 2, isolate the problem by removing all the extra variables. 3, test your theory on one specific component. And 4, resolve the issue by replacing the faulty part. This method right here is your key to solving any hardware mystery. And there you have it. You now have the mindset and the method of a PC detective. So the next time a computer problem pops up, you're not going to feel panic. You're going to see a case just waiting to be solved. So the only question left is, what's the first clue you're going to look for?